Welcome to Venture in the South. These are the stories of innovation and success in the southern U.S. that make money, have fun, and do good.
Welcome back to Venture in the South, a podcast about angel investing and startup companies in the southeastern United States. On this week's episode, I'm your host, Paul, and I'm here with Zach. Zach is on the management team of a company called Windjammer, and we wanted to give you a chance to listen to Zach's story. In an unusual situation, this is a company that is actively raising money, and we can tell you about it. In an unusual quirk of fundraising rules, we can't usually do that, but today we can. So excited to have Zach on the show to give you the pitch and tell you a bit about what he's working on. So Zach, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul, thank you. It was good catching up with you recently in Greensboro, and I'm excited about the opportunity to talk a little more about the Windjammer Way.
Great. Well, why don't we start off with a pretty easy one? Can you give us a bit about your background and how you came to be involved in this project?
Sure. Yeah, my background really for almost the entirety of my career has been in the travel and events sector. I've been specializing really almost the last 20 years in sports tours. I have a couple different ventures where we call them away game experiences for NFL fans. We do that here domestically. And then in the last 4 or 5 years, we've really been specializing and focusing on international travel for the NFL games. It's been a ton of fun. It's been very, very rewarding. So basically, I tailgate for a living is the fun way I like to explain it to people. But uh, yeah, that's pretty much been my whole life. Even back through college, I was always the person organizing events, and I DJ'd at parties. So just really creating experiences to bring people together socially, or to bring them together to create community has always been my wheelhouse, and been what I've done naturally and done well. Charles, my partner, also has a similar background. He has a large tourism company in South Florida, and they produce all kinds of wonderful events through the Everglades in South Florida, through the Bahamas, through the Keys. So we pair very well when we're coming together to talk about opportunities and things we want to do for the Windjammer.
Yeah, I think it'll become clear pretty quickly why that's a relevant background to what you're doing today. So can you tell us a little bit about what the Windjammer story?
Yes, Charles has actually been a family friend of mine for about 25 years now. And he called me one day about a year and a half ago out of the blue to let me know that he was in the process of purchasing the SV Mandalay. The Mandalay is a 236-foot, three-masted sailing schooner, and it's one of two remaining original sailing vessels from the Windjammer Barefoot Cruises fleet. So he told me he was negotiating with the government of Grenada and looking to purchase the ship and potentially relaunch a cruise line. And my first reaction was that he's a maniac. That's absolutely crazy. But I decided to do a little due diligence, because the intention of this call was to gauge my interest, to see if I would be interested in partnering with him and help develop the company. So, when I started looking into Windjammer Barefoot Cruises, I was just really impressed by their history. They operated for 65 years. They really invented and pioneered sailing schooner cruising out of Miami, based in Miami. They had up to six, I think, vessels at the heyday of their operation before they went out of business in 2007. But just truly remarkable brand, incredible name. I started talking to just random friends and people connections that I know and mentioning it, and more than half were aware of it or had experienced it or had family that had. So I thought that was really impressive. I also discovered that they had left behind, when they went out of business in '07, tens of thousands of existing customers. Found them. These customers on their own organically have created social media groups where even today, almost 20 years later, they still maintain contact. They still post very frequently, sharing pictures or sharing stories of their experiences. So just seeing how the time and their interaction with this company, with these vessels specifically, meant to them was really touching, but also seeing how they continue to stay together and communicate with one another and recognize a name that may have been a passenger on a cruise that they were on back in the 80s or the 90s. Really drew a lot of parallels with what I do with the NFL, because on the surface we plan trips and tours, but really what we do, if you dig a little deeper, is we use the NFL and these games and the experiences to bring fans together and create communities. And we see that they stay together after our experiences. Maybe they go back to their home city and start tailgating together. But the community aspect was a big draw for me for this opportunity. And then when I looked even a little bit deeper, I noticed that the landscape of the current competitors, while they have fantastic offerings and do a great job and have been very successful, some have been operating for multiple decades, their culture is completely different than what made Windjammer Barefoot Cruises so special. And whether they've haven't been able to replicate it or they haven't tried, no one has. And it's just what made them such a powerhouse and created that connectivity with these guests, the opportunity there to take all of the good things and replicate some of the traditions and the customs and that overall sailing culture that made them famous, while also bringing it a little more modern, injecting some new ideas and technologies. Just felt like a really interesting opportunity. So yeah, I told him that I was interested, and also very candidly saying that I own a cruise line is very fun to say when I'm talking to my friends. So that's
Yeah, all
part
right.
of it too.
Right.
Um,
So it sounds marginally less crazy now you've outlined some of the assets that were there, but it still sounds a little bit crazy. How do you go about relaunching uh, an out of business cruise line? What are the things you have to put together to get started?
Well, so the first was the acquisition of the ship, and then we tugged her to Trinidad to a shipyard there called Maritime Preservations. Interesting enough, the original owner of Windjammer Barefoot Cruises, his name is Captain Mike Burke. His eldest son, Mike Burke Jr., as the business started falling apart, Mike has always been very interested in the engineering aspects of ship creation, and he took over their family shipyard, and got out as the business was falling apart there. So we tugged the ship, we tugged the Mandalay to Mike. Mike was actually the original project manager 40 years ago when they converted this ship into a sailing vessel. So it was his first main project. It's his baby. So now he has the opportunity, 40 years later, to essentially rebuild her. So that's kind of where you get started is going there, assessing everything that needs to be done. We found over the last 40 years that any kind of necessary repairs were really just patched up, or band-aids were put on the ship. So as we dug pretty deep, we came to the conclusion that in order to make her last another 100 years, she's 102 years old right now, we really needed to go all in and almost rebuild her to bring her up to safety levels and bring her up to the standard that we want to present with the wind.
Okay, got it. So ship is obviously a key asset to get started. You have a community sort of waiting, ready to re-engage with you, and presumably some of those prior customers are likely to be first customers once they can get back on board, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. Once word got out in that community that we had purchased the ship and that we were underway trying to restore her and relaunch the cruise line, we were getting weekly emails from people wanting to be on the inaugural cruise or joining the wait list. I mean, I've even had people call and ask if they could just go ahead and give me their credit card number over the phone. I mean, it's been pretty exciting. And just from a business standpoint, having tangible customers that we can actually turn that into revenue, and the waiting is fun to see as well. But then, for us, even though there is a lot of ties in my personal experience with traveling and community and creating events and experiences, this is a totally new realm for me. So I knew coming into it that I had a lot to learn, and I have learned a lot, and there's still plenty more to go. So just kind of wrapping my head around the business development side of it, and how different that was from my normal background, but just understanding how the relationships with the different islands and their governments and the ports, and then obviously the logistics of making sure the ship has the necessary provisions, and what it looks like to turn one cruise over to the other, and things like that. Actually, I love doing. I think that problem solving and that creating and that building out of how everything is going to look, mixed in with their actual experiences of excursions and what the culture on the ship looks like, and what customs and traditions are going to happen at different times. Just really high level building those thoughts and processes out as we're going down the line of the restoration, is kind of basically how we came out of the starting gate. And then obviously once we got into the ship and we did a full evaluation of what was necessary, we deemed that we were going to have to go to the market and raise some capital to bring it to fruition.
Yeah, got it. We'll definitely talk about the fundraising in a minute. Just want to explore a couple more of the operational things first. So If somebody is familiar with a cruise on a big ship, a Disney cruise or something like that, how, other than being a sailing ship, how is this different from that kind of experience?
Yeah, so our ship, its capacity is somewhere between 60 and 66 people. So right out of the gate, it's very intimate. Doesn't have the, I guess, luxuries, for lack of a better term, that the big ships. It doesn't have all the extra. It doesn't have the casino or the spa or the swimming pool or the roller coaster and zip lines as we're seeing now on some of the massive ships. It's very much about one, the experience on the ship, interacting with the other guests, interacting with the crew, being very hands on. The former guests would help raise the sails. They would have the opportunity to actually grab the wheel of the ship with the captain and steer the ship as we're going and take sailing lessons, things like that. Just some, explanations from the captain. So there were even opportunities where they pitch in and they would help our chef Boston bring the food out. So it was very much being involved. And in addition to that, because our ship is smaller, she also has two tenders, two smaller boats where we can run people to the shore. So we're not pigeonholed into only going into those large ports. In fact, we avoid those ports completely. And I don't know if you've been on a large cruise before, but I have. And to me, when you dock there and you're dumping 5 or 6 thousand people at the same time into this small area, one is very commercialized. Many of them feel like a shopping mall, but also just the mass number of people at one time, just inundating that area. To me, it's very stressful. It's not what I picture when I'm thinking of having a relaxing Caribbean vacation. It just feels more like too much hustle and bustle. So the advantage for us is we can go into smaller ports, we can go into areas that aren't even necessarily ports and run people up to the shore. So the opportunity to build what we think is a more authentic experience where we can show them parts of these destinations that they don't see on a normal basis. And we can partner with people on the islands, right, to really highlight what they do, whether it's cultural or culinary or wellness. We can really impact those local areas as well. And we just think it's a totally different. We like to use the word romantic, certainly authentic, certainly intimate, and it's just completely different from those experiences.
Yeah, that sounds pretty nice. So I'm going to try and find out
Very
how to sign myself up for that at some point. I guess your target audience outside of people who are already familiar with the experience is, I guess, people looking for a more boutique, unusual travel experiences. The same kind of people that do slightly fancier camping outings or stay in boutique hotels more than the sort of mass market, right?
Absolutely, and that was part of the research that I did originally too. We know that the existing boutique market is about 3% of the global cruise market. The global cruise market is expected in 2035 to hit 203 billion. Last year it was $74 billion. So that 3% actually, represents about $88 million in 2024. So that segment already exists. People who want an alternative. I mean, the good news is we know that they like to cruise already, right? We know this market globally is gigantic. And so we're not reinventing the wheel by creating this boutique experience. We know it's there. We know Windjammer was one of the pioneers to create it. So we know that people are interested in that. We also know that younger folks, which I think is important because when Windjammer went out of business, it's been close to 20 years. So a lot of those passengers are getting older. And I think they're excited to share that experience with their kids or even their grandkids. However, creating a younger generation of customers and new customers is very important to us. So knowing that younger people are opting for more authentic and smaller and more of a connection opportunity when they're choosing their vacation is very, very important. But then even further, a lot of people are choosing purposeful travel, whether it's based around a hobby or wellness travel. They're looking to not just show up at Cancun and sit in an all inclusive by the pool all day and eat and drink. They're looking to actually do something more enriching and something to really be a part of the culture and the experience of where they're going. And that's actually been the number one motivator when people are choosing their travel since 2015. So I think all those things playing together, our ability to really create our own destinations and our routes. And even back in Windjammer's day, they have an overall guideline of where they're going to visit, right? It's a 7-day cruise. They're going to start here. They're going to go around and come back, but it's not as rigid as a big cruise ship where it's, you arrive in port at 7 a.m. You get off the ship at 10. Everybody has to get back on 4. We have the ability, if we stop in a destination and everyone is having a good time, we don't need to leave at a specific time. We can really gauge what's going on and how everybody's enjoying themselves and just really go from there of how we want to do the rest of the trip.
Okay, got it. I guess your operational challenge though is wind or other factors that might make that harder to do. So what are the big challenges that you're going to face operationally speaking?
Yeah, well, the ship, has an engine as well. Sailing is a big part of it, but the propulsion generally is from the engine. We actually, right now in the restoration process, the first part of descaling is we've been removing tons and tons of concrete. I think concrete was used as a ballast 40 years ago, but what it's done is actually it's caused the ship to sit a lot further down into the water than it should, which affects the sailing, which makes her sway, even more than she should. So a ship should be heavy at the bottom and then lighter as it goes up. So by removing all that concrete, there's new material, more modern material for ballast that we're going to replace it with that'll allow it to sail much more beautifully. Is a big part. A lot of it is the aesthetics of the sails going up as well. But challenging. I mean, again, I think it's going back is to what I said before. Is it's like really learning all the different parts, learning how to make sure our supplies are getting there, and what it looks like in between cruises, and as we're rebuilding the ship, making sure we have the proper space. The way it was built before, it wasn't SOLAS compliant, which is the highest level of credibility in the maritime industry. It's safety of life at seas. So as we're going through the restoration, we're going to ensure that we're building it back up properly to get that SOLAS compliance. That gives us a lot of flexibility with where we can visit within the Caribbean. It gives us the ability to have it flagged by a really nice nation, and just gives it more respect. Plus, it's safer for the passengers as well.
Yeah, got it. Great. Okay, so let's move on to some more business focused questions. How do you make money then as a boutique cruise line?
Absolutely. Obviously the purchase of the cruise, we're basing a double occupancy cabin. Average rate will be 5,300 per couple. But in addition to that, charters is we're anticipated being about 35 to 40% of our business. With that being Charles' background and my background, actually I have a Carolina Panthers themed cruise coming up in February on one of the big ships. But that's an example of an affinity type cruise that we're already working on different interests and hobbies that we can build those things around. That's something that's very exciting. But the opportunity for them to charter the entire ship, and we can cater the offerings on the ship to their specific interests and needs. There are a lot of onboard sale opportunities. These can be things like the bar is obviously a big selling point. We've secured a strategic cocktail brand partner already, so that's very exciting too. Wi-Fi, surprisingly, is a big selling point. People want to stay connected now, no matter what. And when we were discussing having Wi-Fi available, I think with our culture and what we want to represent, we are actually going to deter people from using the Wi-Fi. We want them to be present. We want them to stay in the moment. We want them to enjoy their cruise and everything that's going on. However, if they need it, it'll be there. Excursions obviously is a big thing. So each port, will have a bunch of different options to connect to that area. We also have an online and an onboard store called Sea Chest. Windjammer had Sea Chest back in the day, and it was a very big revenue generating stream for them. And some of the posts that I'm seeing online in these social media groups, people are posting their windbreakers or their hats or just different merch items that they've had for 30 or 40 years. And then we're also going to have a membership program, and that's built similarly to what I've done in the NFL. And that's how I really created that community. In addition to providing the trips, people can join and be a member, and, they pay a nominal annual fee. Each year they get some type of membership kit that'll have a shirt or a scarf or other items in it, relevant to their team. But by doing that is where my business really pivoted from just being someone who's managing their travel to having people now vested into the community, and wearing their shirts and becoming advocates and even almost like miniature salespeople for the organization. From that, they're participating in our events and our trips more frequently. So we want to use that concept to bring that to Windjammer Way. And that'll give people, the members, an opportunity to go a little bit deeper. We'll give them some exclusive opportunities. We'll have land-based and sea-based events that they'll have priority access to. One of the things we learned from the former guests is that people are really particular about which cabin they have on the ship. So the opportunity for them to potentially book and see the routes before they go on sale to the general public is something that they're very attracted to. So right now we've identified as 4 streams as being our 4 major revenue streams coming out.
Okay, got it. Let's put our investor hat on for a second. You are doing a fundraising that you can talk about publicly. So can you tell us a little bit about what the fundraising is to start with?
Right. We are working with Vicinity Capital on a Reg CF, which is a crowdfunding platform. So far, we have surpassed the $3 million threshold. When we first came out and started talking about raising, we just went private and we were working through our networks, but really it just seemed too obvious to not look at crowdfunding, with the existing passengers and their loyalty and their ties to the ship, plus my network of community and Charles' existing customers and friends as well. Just made a lot of sense to allow people to come in at a lower level, but for them, with the perks and the different tiers and the things that we've built in, allowing them to come in at any kind of level, but then the opportunity to have their name on the ship, to receive special merchandise that shows that they were one of the people that helped with the restoration and the creation of the business. It was obvious, and so far we've had a lot of success with it. And yeah, I think it's been great to be able to help the current, or excuse me, the former passengers be a part of the ship's legacy going forward.
Yeah, nice. It's a great way to leverage that history and nostalgia and enthusiasm for the brand. That makes a lot of sense. Are you trying to raise a lot more than 3 million in total?
Yeah, so we're raising 9 million in total, and what that's going to do for us, it's going to allow us to completely restore the Mandalay. It's going to allow us to create everything we need for the business. The website, the reservation system is obviously very important for us. We've hired a director of marketing who has just been remarkable and done so much for us in her first 2 months with the company. And it'll allow us to actually acquire the second ship too. So, that's our goal with the uses of funds of the $9 million. But the exciting thing that is, the restoration process is a good 15 to 18 months before the ship will be done. And in about 60 days, we'll have a more clear, firm in water date. We'll start generating revenue and taking reservations a good 6 to 8 months before that actual date, when we're very confident of when that'll be. So, obviously people are booking their vacations, not last minute. Some are even booking them, a year and a half, 2 years out. So, we'll be able to do that. And then I'll just have to figure out how I'm going to put 300 people on a 60 passenger capacity ship for the inaugural cruise with all the demand we have for it.
Well, that's an interesting problem to have. Yeah, I'm interested to see how you solve that one. Okay, got it. But so you've closed on that first tranche of money, so you've started the refurbishment and things are moving ahead, right?
Correct. Yeah, we started the restoration officially, I'd say it's about 8 weeks ago. We've started the first iteration of the website, which should be done in about 2 weeks. So things are moving forward, and yeah, as we continue to raise to get to close it out to the 9 million that we're looking for.
Okay, and then in sort of very round numbers, when do you think the in water date will be? When will the first cruises go out?
We're looking at early 2026, right around the March April time is what we're
Okay,
anticipating.
so
Which,
a year from now.
exactly. And that comes in more towards the end of the traditional cruise season. Summer is the slowest market, but that does give us multiple months to introduce it, and then be ready to go when the next season rolls around at the end of September, October.
Okay, got it. Adventure South, we don't usually invest in sailing ships. So my initial concern would be how does this scale? How many ships do you think you can deploy? How big can the company be on not too much more funding than this round? Can you give us a sense for that?
Yeah, so our goal is, as we move forward, to use company revenues and any debt opportunities to continue to grow. But that is what we are focused on. Knowing Windjammer Barefoot Cruises had 6 vessels, and it was interesting the way that Mike Burke started his company. He started with a small 15-person ship, doing it more for fun with his friends. Saw there was an opportunity, went to 30, and then ultimately they got up to 100 to 25, 150 passenger ships. And we're fortunate that we're going to target those right out of the gate. The Mandalay is smaller, like I said, it's 60 to 66, but the two additional ships right now that we kind of have our eyes on are right in that 125 passenger range. We believe 150 is kind of our ceiling. We don't want to go beyond that because we want to keep that intimacy and that feel. Our goal to add multiple ships, we've identified at least 6 to 8 unique route opportunities, and that's taking the hurricane season into consideration, where we can have ships that can just run their own independent routes in those areas. Our goal in the first 5 years is to get to that third ship. But ultimately we believe there's an opportunity to get to 8.
Okay, got it. One of the things we also think about Venture South is what the exit might be for investors coming in early on. So do you have a plan to be a independent brand for 80 years, or are there ways that investors can seek to get their money out at some point?
Well, Charles and I joke about it because, like I said, he's very much a historian and he's a romantic for the brand. He's followed it for 30 years plus and always had his eye on it. If you ask him, he'll run it until he's 125 years old, and that's right off into the sales set on the sunset with one of the ships. But no, I think once we build this and once we start scaling, and there's certainly an opportunity we believe to exit. We've done some simulations with potential investment levels and what that might look like after a 5-year buyout, and we're happy there. But I think our goal is, if we and when we get to those 3 ships in 5 years and we're running the way that we anticipate that we are, then we're going to have a pretty strong case and look pretty attractive for an acquisition.
Probably not going to be wanting to be acquired by a big cruise line though, by Carnival or something. So got to find somebody that will keep your brand independent and keep this ethos going for
Yeah, I think I could talk Charles into selling before he turns 125, but I think it would be hard to convince either one of us to compromise our brand like that and what we're trying to build.
Yeah. Okay, got it. So if somebody is interested in learning more after listening to this, what can they do to dig in a bit further?
Yeah, the best place to start would be at the Vicinity Capital page. We have our own unique offer page there on their site. There's plenty of information. I didn't really touch on the history of the ship. I mentioned she was 102 years old, but just quickly, she was originally commissioned by E.F. Hutton for his wife, Marjorie Mayweather Post from Post Cereals. This was their private yacht. The ship later, they donated it to the University of Columbia, where it's logged more than 1 million oceanic miles. This ship is actually where the continental drift theory was discovered. So it's really incredible. But a lot of stuff like that is on their site, as well as breaking down some of the financials, the projections. And then, as I mentioned, in about 2 or 3 weeks or so, our site, the windjammerway.com, will be live. And actually, we've been working on it. It looks beautiful. And, I'm excited to present that to the world.
Okay, great. It sounds like you have the inaugural cruises sewn up, but is it not too far that people can start thinking about booking their, maybe not the first week, but some later week cruises for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're 6 to 8 months from being able to do that, and that'll be an exciting time. And we'll make sure we have plenty of family and friend cruises. And we'll figure out a way to get everybody on that inaugural cruise.
Yeah, right. And I'm going to try to figure out how to create a budget of Venture South for a Venture South charter of the yacht. That'll be a fun event.
We'll sign you guys up.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Zach. I really appreciate you running us through that. That's a fun, different kind of company than the ones we typically look at. So I hope people enjoyed learning about it, and hope people will get involved through the Vicinity platform or on board at some point.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it. Thanks again, Paul. And yeah, we're excited, and hopefully they'll get involved, or at the very least come and take a cruise and experience the culture for themselves.
Thank you for listening. Visit us at ventureinthesouth.com for a complete list of previous and future shows.